The story begins in a Russian prison, where we meet a man named Frank Abagnale Jr. Frank is a notorious con man who has committed numerous crimes. An FBI agent named Carl has come to take him back to the United States. Carl was talking to Frank when Frank's health suddenly deteriorated. Initially, Carl thought it was a trick, but then realized that no one could act like this. He rushed him to the hospital as quickly as possible. However, Frank, seeing the opportunity, tried to escape. However, the police apprehended him, after which he remembers his story from the beginning. Frank was born into a very happy family. His parents loved each other very much. One day, Frank's father took him to a shop to buy a suit, but the woman there said the shop was closed. Frank quickly pulled out a necklace and asked if it was hers. The woman was impressed and said, "It's okay, just buy the suit." Frank's father was a master at such tricks. He then asked Frank to become his chauffeur and soon arrived at the bank. Shortly after, the bank manager came to receive him. Frank's father had suffered a huge business loss and needed a loan. Because of a different accountant, he was late in paying his taxes, resulting in significant losses. But despite all this, no bank was willing to help. The government seized Frank's father's car, property, and money. Despite this financial crisis, Frank's father opened a bank account for Frank. Frank asked him why he was doing this. He was in debt himself. His father replied, "Don't worry about me. Your whole life is ahead of you. You have to live well." Their lives were suddenly hit hard, so Frank had to change schools. But on his first day at this new school, a boy started harassing Frank. He made fun of him, saying, "You look like a teacher," and then walked away, telling him to dress appropriately for his age. Frank was enraged by this behavior and began acting like a real teacher. He entered the classroom and asked the real teacher, "What are you doing here?" "This is my class. I'll teach now, come back later." The poor teacher left, deeply upset. Frank then humiliated the boy in front of everyone. It wasn't until a week later that the school learned of a student teaching the class in this manner, just as he was about to take the entire class on a trip. Frank's parents were summoned to the school. His father was serious in front of the principal, but later laughed at Frank about it. One day, when Frank returned home, he saw someone else in his mother's bedroom. The man worked with Frank's father. His mother tried her best to pretend nothing was going on, and even offered him some money, saying, "Son, buy something for yourself." But Frank had seen through it all. A few days later, Frank's parents decided to separate. The lawyer asked Frank, "Would you like to live with your mother or your father?" Frank was devastated to see his family crumble before his eyes. He couldn't bear it anymore. He ran away from home and moved to another city. He didn't have much money, just a bank account and his checkbook. He kept issuing checks to hoteliers, but when the checks gradually started bouncing, the hoteliers fired him. Then one day, while sitting idle, he got the idea that checks could be exchanged. This was a time long past, and technology wasn't so advanced at the time. Taking advantage of this, Frank gradually began making counterfeit checks. He wrote different names on them and cashed them. And if the bank manager refused to give him cash, he would confidently resort to his father's old tricks, like the necklace trick, which would get his work done. But gradually, his trick began to unravel. His checks were no longer accepted at any bank. Then one day, Frank noticed a pilot outside a hotel. Everyone respected him greatly. Seeing this, Frank got the idea, why not become a pilot? Not a real one, but a fake one. Then everyone would respect him greatly, and his checks would be cashed easily. Then, posing as a fake reporter, he went to the airport and told the officials there, "I'm not a pilot. I am writing an article on pilots." For this, he needed to know some important things. He found out where pilots get their uniforms and called them to say, "My uniform is worn out. Can I get a new one stitched?" After some trickery, Frank purchased a nice uniform. He was going to pay by check, but the employee there said, "All I need is your pilot ID. Then you don't need to pay anything. We'll get it from the airline ourselves." Frank had made a fake ID and got the uniform for free. Then, Frank went to the bank to cash his check. Previously, the bank refused to pay him anything. Now the manager personally came to him and cashed his check. Then he learned from a hotel that he could cash checks for large amounts, not just small ones, but it had to be his salary check. After this, Frank started making fake salary checks. He would cut the airline company's logo from toy planes and paste it on the checks. Then he took his salary check to the bank. But the manager said, "Sir, you can cash it directly at the airport." Frank was able to cash the check at any time at the airport. and this impressed him greatly. The receptionist asked him, "Are you flying with us today?" Frank said yes, and she took him directly onto the plane. Pilots had free seats on the plane. Frank wasn't a real pilot, so he was very nervous, but he still displayed great confidence in front of everyone. Then he approached a beautiful air hostess and asked her, "Is this your necklace?" Using this trick from his father, he impressed the girl. Frank looked slightly older than his age, and no one suspected that he wasn't a real pilot at 22 or 23. Frank was enjoying his life to the fullest. He even began flirting with a bank manager and began to understand the entire system, where checks come from, where they go, and how account numbers are assigned. He figured it all out. He learned that a typewriter was used to encode bank checks, so he bought a similar second-hand one. Frank was no longer just a fraud. His work had become more professional. Gradually, he began withdrawing larger amounts of money using these checks, and his frauds became increasingly elaborate. News of his activities reached the FBI, and the case was assigned to an agent named Carl. He took his work very seriously. One day, Frank met his father, to whom he often wrote letters, informing him of his activities. Frank's father believed his son had truly become a pilot and was very proud of him. Frank said, "The government took everything from you, so I bought you a car with my earnings, the same one James Bond drove in the movies." But Frank's father said, "After the tax fraud, the government is still after me. If I take this car, they'll take it away from me in a few days." Frank's father's store had also closed. He was struggling. Frank even offered him money, but he said, "I can't take it from you." Frank had a deep understanding of the entire country's system. He would travel from state to check. The FBI had been closely monitoring his activities and soon arrived at the hotel where Frank had last checked in. Inquiring at the hotel, they discovered that Frank was still staying there. He had been there so long that he'd become acquainted with everyone. Carl, armed with a gun, went straight to Frank's room. Frank, knowing he would be caught if he didn't use any cunning, began to act in front of Carl, saying, "Yes, calm down. I'm from the Secret Service. What do you think? You're looking for this man alone? The entire government is after him." Carl said, "Show me your ID. How can I believe it?" "You're who you say you are," Frank replied. "Just keep my entire wallet. Check it out quietly." Carl couldn't open the wallet with one hand. Just then, Frank told him, "Look, our men have caught that swindler. We got here before you." Downstairs, Frank was helping a neighbor, a blind man, into his car. Watching from a distance, Carl realized the swindler had truly been caught. This gave Carl even more confidence in Frank. Frank took all his check-making equipment and told Carl that the police would be arriving shortly. He'd leave this evidence downstairs. Carl had now fully trusted him. He offered, "Here, take your wallet too." But Frank deliberately said, "No, you keep it," and fled with all the essentials. A short while later, when Carl finally opened the wallet, he found nothing inside. The cunning swindler had fled before his eyes. This humiliated Carl. His boss also scolded him. Carl was so angry that he even scolded his boss. Gradually, Airlines began to notice Frank's posing as a pilot. It was now difficult for him to continue the same scam. When the press learned of this, they dubbed Frank James Bond. Frank was overjoyed, and he began wearing suits and buying a similar car. Time passed, and Christmas arrived. Carl was working alone in his office. Frank called him and said, "I want to apologize for everything I've done to you." Frank even gave him his address. But Carl said, "You're trying to trap me, aren't you? This time, I won't fall into your trap, son." Carl added, "You may have money, but you're very lonely. That's why you're calling me." Frank was deeply offended by this and hung up. But this time, Frank was telling the truth. He had given Carl his real address. The last time Carl spoke to Frank, he had given his name as Barry Allen, a comic book character. Carl then called his office and reported, "This is some kid who looks a little older. He's very young. That's why we can't find him." Carl then said, "Get a list of kids who have run away from home." Someone must have filed a report. After a thorough investigation, he finally arrived at Frank's house, where he found Frank's mother. When Frank's mother was shown the photo, she confirmed, "Yes, this is my son." Carl told Frank's mother, "He's a real con man. As soon as we find out, we should inform the police." Frank's mother replied, "He's just a kid. He must have taken some money for food and drinks." Picking up her wallet, she said, "I'll pay." "How much do you have to pay?" Carl replied, $1.4 million, or about $1.4 million. Frank's mother was stunned to hear this. Meanwhile, Frank was living a very good life in another city. He had some work to do at a hospital, so he went there. A nurse named Brenda was crying. She had been scolded by a doctor for something. Frank consoled her, saying, "Don't worry, you're amazing. That doctor is crazy." Just then, an idea came to Frank's mind. He asked Brenda if there were any job vacancies there. Actually, becoming a pilot had become a bit risky, so Frank decided to become a doctor. He didn't even get a degree from Harvard, but went for the interview. The doctor there also thought, "Sir, you'll work in our small hospital." Frank had gone there after watching movies about different doctors so he could learn how to behave. Frank replied, "Sir, I want to help people in small towns, not big cities." He quickly got the job. He didn't do any work. He simply gave doctors useless advice. Furthermore, in his spare time, he and Brenda became very close. Then, one day, he was called in for an emergency case. A small child had suffered a serious injury. The sight of the blood shook Frank. With complete confidence, he asked the doctor, "What are you going to do?" The doctor replied, "Absolutely right. I'm confident you can do it. I'll be back in a while to see if we've done the right thing." With that, he left. But in reality, his condition had worsened. Meanwhile, Carl went to see Frank's father and told him everything about Frank's exploits. Frank's father replied, "I don't know where he is, and even if I knew, I wouldn't tell you." Carl realized that the father and son were very close. He must be sending letters. He calculated from the letters lying around where Frank lived. He was about to go there soon with the police. Meanwhile, Frank and Brenda had fallen in love. One day, Brenda suddenly burst into tears. She told Frank that she had already had an abortion and that her father had thrown her out of the house. Frank thought for a moment and asked, "Look, if I talk to your father about marriage, will he accept you?" Brenda was very impressed. Frank then went to meet Brenda's father. Brenda's father was a lawyer. Frank said, "I was also a lawyer first, and only then did I become a doctor." He had even seen films about law. He impressed everyone with his words. Brenda's father asked, "Tell me the truth. What did a man like you see in my daughter?" Frank replied, "I'm just an ordinary man who loves your daughter." Brenda's father was very impressed. Frank asked Brenda's father, "What do I need to do if I want to practice law here?" He replied, "You've got to study law. You've already finished school. You just have to take an exam, after which you can practice here." Frank then studied and took the exam, becoming a lawyer. The story then returns to the present, where Carl has arrested Frank. Carl asks him how he passed that exam. Frank replies, "What difference does it make? You'll take me to jail anyway, not to court." The story then flashes back to the past, where we see Frank getting along well with Brenda's family. He was about to marry Brenda. He expresses his desire to meet his father and tells him, "We'll get back everything the government took from us, and then you can convince your mother, and we'll all live together like before." His father tells him that his mother has married someone else. Frank is deeply saddened by this. He also says, "I found out about your activities." Frank was deeply shocked by this and left. That night, Frank called Carl and told him, "I'm getting married. I want to forget everything that happened between us." Frank now wanted all the charges against him dropped. Carl replied, "I'll never leave you. I'll keep pursuing you as long as I'm employed. You can't escape after all this." Carl then came up with an idea. He knew Frank couldn't change his name after marriage. Carl ordered a search everywhere for the name he had used when he became a doctor. He figured the wedding invitation must have been printed somewhere, so he started keeping an eye on everything. Frank got married, and all the agents arrived. Frank, upon seeing this, took Brenda to his room. Frank told Brenda the truth. He had been fooling people all along, but he truly loved her. He said, "I'm just running away, so meet me at the airport and don't tell anyone where you're going." The next day, Frank waited for Brenda at the airport. Brenda arrived, but she wasn't alone. She was accompanied by agents. Frank's escape became increasingly difficult. Then he hit upon an idea. He went to a college and announced that their airline was hiring a large number of air hostesses. After conducting numerous interviews, he selected beautiful women. With those women surrounding him, he donned a pilot's uniform and entered the airport. All the police officers were mesmerized by the beauty of the beautiful women, and Frank easily escaped. Meanwhile, a man resembling Frank stood outside the airport in a car. All the FBI agents rushed to apprehend him. When caught, the boy claimed that someone had paid him to stand there. Frank cleverly escaped the country. After this, he committed major frauds in many different countries. Frank's last known location was where he was forging checks. Carl told his superiors, "Let me go there, I'll catch him." But his superiors refused. "You can't catch him in our country, but you'll catch him in another country." Then Carl dug up more information about Frank and discovered that Frank was now printing his checks. Carl knew that Frank was in Russia, but Russia isn't a small country. Where in Russia, he remembered that Frank's mother was from a small village in Russia, and after some research, he discovered that there was a printing press there. It was Christmas Eve again. When he arrived, Carl found Frank. Frank said, "Come, I'll take you for a walk. Come outside with me." Carl said, "Don't try to escape, or the police here will kill you." Carl said, "If you surrender now, I can save you." Frank told him, "I swear on my children." Carl swore an oath, saying, "Believe me, I'm telling the truth." Frank then put on handcuffs, but when he emerged, there was no one there. For a moment, Frank thought he was out of his mind, but the next moment, several police cars arrived. The story returns to the present. Carl and Frank were about to land in America. Frank said, "I want to talk to my father." Carl, with a heavy heart, told him that his father had died after falling in the bathroom. Frank was deeply shocked by this and went to the restroom, crying loudly. There was very little time left before the plane landed. He was saved. But when Frank still didn't come out of the bathroom, Carl broke down the door to see if he was still inside. But by then, Frank had unscrewed the sink and was already inside the belly of the plane. As soon as the wheels were released, Frank seized the opportunity and fled that very night to visit his mother. He saw that his mother had settled down very well with her new family, and they even had a little girl. Meanwhile, Carl knew Frank would definitely go to his mother's house, and he arrived and arrested Frank. Frank was under 19 years of age. Carl wanted him treated as a minor, but the government wanted the harshest punishment for committing such a massive scam. He was going to rot in solitary confinement for 10 years, unable to speak to anyone. Then one day, Carl came to visit him. He discovered someone else committing the same fraud Frank was committing. Frank asked, "Show me his check." As soon as he saw the check, Frank realized, "Look, there's something fishy about this." And Carl realized that only Frank could help him stop this kind of crime. The next time he visited, Carl brought some FBI agents with him. They too were impressed by Frank's approach to solving cases. Gradually, Carl got Frank out of jail and gave him a job with the FBI. He had to work 8 hours a day. Life had given him another chance. If he tried to escape, he would be sentenced to 50 years in prison. Frank tried his best to do well, but he became increasingly bored. He retrieved his FBI records and purged them. He was about to escape to another country that weekend, but Carl stopped him and said, "Look, you're a kid. Life has given you another chance, so you should take advantage of it. If you run away, you'll spend your entire life in prison."
I'm not going to stop you, but come back to work on Monday.
Remember, no one is chasing you. There's no need to run from anyone. Frank left, and on Monday Carl was waiting for him impatiently. For a moment he thought Frank had run away again, but he returned and began working brilliantly on various cases. Frank soon found a woman, married her, and began living a better life. After making a name for himself in the FBI, he started a company that worked to eliminate all types of bank fraud. Who could catch thieves better than Frank? This is a true story in which Frank ultimately became a millionaire, even through legitimate means. If you enjoy what we do here, please like the video and subscribe to this channel to keep us motivated. See you on the next video.